Thank you so much. And thank you for those of you that are staying in the room. And please do stay because you're not going to be disappointed because we have an epic panel coming up. And to do that, I'd like to invite to the stage Len Khodorkovsky, Senior Advisor to the Chairman of the Krach Institute for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue University. Fernando, Garibay, a Polymath academic, a super producer, and chairman and founder of the Garibay Institute. Amir, Sagie, cyber coordinator for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Israel. And Pavel, Popescu, vice president of the National Authority for Management and Regulation in Communications in Romania. And I'm Dr. Melanie Garson. I'm the cyber and tech geopolitics lead at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and an associate professor at University College London, where I teach about the future of conflict in the digital age. Before we carry on, like everybody, and on behalf of this panel, we want to express that our hearts are with the 120 people who are not here in Israel with us today, and all the families and the victims of everyone who has been suffering since October 7th. And this panel will not be complete until they're all returned home. On that note, we've suffered in the international system, and particularly Israel, a massive breach of trust. And today we're beginning to think about how do we build trust in a world that seems to be operating in a sort of zero trust concept. And actually, anybody who stayed through to the very end of the plenary heard many talk about this big crisis in trust, and that's on an individual basis. I think the crisis of trust at the international level, as we've just alluded to, is even more challenging. At the Institute, back in 2021, we wrote a paper called The Internet on the Brink, where we were looking at the push-pull factors that looked at the fragmentation of the internet. And back then, we looked about where semiconductors were sitting, where subsea cables were sitting, and you could see the sort of potential splintering of the order that we need to facilitate our tech ecosystem. And one of the things that came out of that paper, which we pushed forward, was that in many countries, there's also an absence of vision of where tech sits within foreign policy holistically. And really being able to draw together for when countries are going to international negotiations on different parts of the tech system, whether that's the understanding of what happens in the back room of the ITU is also impacting on your AI ecosystem, and how to join up the dots, and what are the ways that that can be improved, and how both for allies and countries building tech, do we need to resolve this problem or find new mechanisms to help close this diplomacy gap? That's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. And as you've already heard, we've got an extraordinary group of people. It does sound a little bit like a joke when we have a strategic comms person, a super producer, a diplomat, and a politician walk into a bar. Former politician. But that's what we're going to do. So without further ado, and we're not going to have enough time for this conversation, I'm going to go to Amir to give us a little bit of, you have been absolutely at the coalface of negotiations relating to cyber and tech, and really witnessing firsthand where the breakdown of trust is in the international system. If it's not too painful, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Melanie, and I'm really privileged to be here on this panel with very distinguished colleagues here. Maybe I'll try to be giving you both sides, the optimistic and the pessimistic side. Looking back into the multilateral arena, when cybersecurity was just introduced 20, 25 years ago, there was a very big diversion in perceptions, in visions between what we call the like-minded group, the United States and its allies, and the other side. At that time, Russia was leading that side, and many, many years there was a stalemate. There was almost impossible to bridge some of those very diverging positions. But we did manage to get some work done. And there was an understanding and a consensus about the fundamental core norms and principles that should rule this cyberspace and eventually other tech sides of the multilateral arena. But again, geostrategic and geopolitical conflicts still remain, and we've seen that there's a peak of sometime understanding, and then there's a very low point of divergence and impossible negotiations to reach any kind of common grounds. So this has been, it's like a sinus wave that goes up and down. Currently, I must say, very pessimistic. We are in a position where things don't look very optimistic. Those discussions going on in New York and elsewhere on the multilateral fora, under the UN auspices and other frameworks are very extremely complicated because it looks like there's no common ground anymore. And as you said, zero trust is what is ruling this thing. And if at the beginning Russia was the opponent side, now there's another power that is there in the last 10, 15 years that is also bringing a lot of tension into these kind of negotiations, China and the rivalry between China and the US and the West. So all these very difficult conflicts or issues that are not agreed and different visions are basically blocking some of the discussions going on. We've seen it very clearly on what's going on the ad hoc committee that is supposed to present something which is trivial, a global platform to fight together cybercrime. Not talking about, you know, huge technology advances, just very simple things, how to better our mutual legal assistance and understand what is the threat there. And we're talking about criminals, not anything else. And even on that issue, it's almost impossible to reach any kind of common ground. So at the point right now, it looks very pessimistic, but hopefully things are moving forward, and maybe AI is in a way, the negotiation going on different venues and different frameworks are right now can give some optimism, but we'll have to see.
Okay, thank you. So you said the magic word AI, which means we have to think about Europe. And I'm going to turn to you, Pavel. Sort of your remit, you look all across the communication sector, and particularly as part of the EU regulatory system. So where are you seeing now the biggest breakdowns of trust and cooperation on emerging tech from your perspective?
Across Europe, I'm seeing it at the idea of, not the idea, at the fact that the political leadership has died in Europe. That's where I truly believe that the breakdown of finding the common ground to do things together, like a basic platform, like Amir said here, it's lack of political leadership. And it's a personal opinion, and I've seen things being stopped in terms of doing things together. I mean, basic, very basic things. If you go to geopolitics, if you go to diplomacy, if you go to any other reason somebody would invoke, a nation, a state would invoke for a thing that cannot be done because of that. So we don't want to do this European regulation on something, on cybersecurity, which is protecting us, for example. Everybody will find reasons. You know, we are in a geopolitical complicated situation. We cannot align with United States of America or with Israel or with like-minded countries because, you know, we have our issues and relationships with that and that. I think diplomacy died a long time ago, And I think we live in a reality where we have to have a wake-up call regarding the basic things treating the ecosystem of our security as a citizen. So we all know that there are already two teams aligned, the bad guys and the good guys. And it's as simple as that, no matter who comes on the stage and says, you know, it's much more complicated, Pavel, in this region of the world and in that. No, it's not. We are all humans. Values are not negotiable. Security is not negotiable, at least for Romanians. I'm 100% sure that security is not negotiable for Americans, our strongest ally and best friend. Definitely, I am 100% sure that for our very, very good friend Israel, which we're aligned from many points of views regarding our history and heritage together, and that's why I'm today here. I'm here mostly because of the common values we have and to align with a country which suffers today. And I want to feel with my friend in a very hard time for him that, and I want him to feel that I'm here. And it's the same thing on alignment on anything that we can cooperate together. And why tech? Why trusted tech? Why cyber? Because the world is changing. And if 50 years ago we would do everything on paper, today, you know, the world has changed. We don't do it on paper anymore. We do it through communication. And do I want to install a trusted router in my house, or I want to install a non-trusted router in my house? Would I like to buy a router from United States of America or from Israel or from any other country which is aligned with the values that I have, or I want to buy one from Russia, China, or Iran? It's as simple as that on tech. Of course, on other things, we can bring diplomacy back into the discussion, bring geopolitics and other things, bring a more extensive discussion about trade, which, by the way, there's a big disinformation in the world that if somebody wants to cut ties with certain countries on trusted devices just because they cannot deliver on that, and we cannot trust them on that, we tested that thing, it doesn't mean that we want to cut ties diplomatically or on trade or on anything else that makes us to coexist in this world. So trust, and to finish my thought regarding your question, the breakdown in the European regulatory system now, it's starting from the lack of political leadership. Of course, we can invoke plenty of governments. Everybody knows when you put the government on top of something, government usually are complicating things, and I'm representative of a government. But when you put more governments on top of governments, it can become a mess, and you have to do negotiations, etc., etc. But when you have leadership, it takes one leader to say something on a European stage, and we've seen that over the years, and people will follow. Why people are following leaders? Because they are leaders. And I'm praying, literally praying every day, to see Europe back on the track in terms of political leadership. Because thanks God we have a lot of advisors, consultants, bureaucrats, etc. And I pray also to God to see Europe looking in a very honest and pragmatic way at the relationship with the United States of America. Because if that bridge is not built stronger than any time now, the rest is history. We can't discuss about like-minded countries just in all the meetings we have. Like, you know, I can go to South Korea and talk to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, you know, I can go to Israel and talk to Mr. Gabi, the director of your cyber directorate. I can go to anywhere in the world, and we're going to be 2, 3, 4 countries. But if Europe doesn't fix its relationship with United States of America, of course, there are, on both sides, there are things to be done. But I'm a very realistic, optimistic European citizen who really wants to see that relationship fixed in a very honest way. We have to decide first who's who in the zoo and who's with who.
Gosh, a lot to think about. So with innovation relying on trust and needing a new paradigm for relationship, Len, you're here today from the Krach Institute on Tech Diplomacy, which is a new initiative, and where you're looking for building a new direction for trust in tech. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, first of all, I just want to echo your words earlier. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families of the hostages who are missing for way too long. And we hope they're returned as soon as possible. And for the region in general to return to the positive momentum that existed not too long ago, if you remember. And we can talk about cyber and other issues in a whole different context. And I believe that we'll get there. In terms of trust, well, I think based on the previous panel and this panel, I think it's clear that the premise of the world that we're operating in right now is freedom is under attack in various parts of the world. Here in Israel, you know more than most about the about what that means. People in Ukraine certainly know what that means. People in Taiwan live day to day with the prospect of potentially being invaded. I was there recently, and a college student tried to explain to me, an American, how people truly feel. You know, because we come into a place like Israel and Taiwan and we think we know everything, but we don't. And he said, you know, you have to, before we talk about any philosophical ideas that you have to understand that every single Taiwanese person lives with anxiety every single day. And we operate in a constant state of anxiety. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that was very revealing to me. What that tells me is, in a world where freedom is under attack from authoritarian regimes and malign actors of all sorts, technology plays a critical role. It is at the intersection of that battle. And technology in and of itself could be neutral, as we discussed, but the implementation of technology depends on values that Pavel talked about. In order for us to ensure that the world of tomorrow is safe for the next generation, that it advances in keeping with our values, and by values I mean values like respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights, respect for our planet, respect for property rights, these basic things that people in the free world take for granted, but are constantly under attack. And the thing that at the Krach Institute that we're focused on, in our focus on tech diplomacy, is the centrality of technology in figuring out what the world of tomorrow is going to look like. And what we believe, based on our experience in operating in between the world of technology and geopolitics and business, is the key to ensuring that the world of tomorrow is free and safe for the next generation is a single word, and that's trust. As our founder, Keith Krach, says, trust is the most important word in any language. You partner with people you trust, you do business with people you trust, you have relationships with people you trust, you love people you trust. And that is simply at the core of collaboration between entities or people that can make long-term commitments to each other or they can't. That's exactly as straightforward as Pavel just mentioned. It is as simple, but at the same time, hard to do. So at the, I guess we're at a very difficult stage at this moment here, both in Israel and the Middle East and beyond, in Europe certainly. But I think I am optimistic simply because, well, firstly, every crisis presents an opportunity. And we need to look for opportunities at this moment of crisis as to how we align together around trust and ensure that the technology of tomorrow, which is going to be decisive in the kind of world that we're going to create together, is built around trusted principles like the ones I mentioned in terms of respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights and things like that, transparency, accountability, integrity. These are basic values that we approach business deals with, that we approach treaties with, and that are going to be the key in building the world of tomorrow. So what I would ask everybody here to think about is it's not the job of governments to make that happen. It's not the job of business leaders or university heads. It is the job of every single person in this room to accept the responsibility that you are a stakeholder in the world that we are building, in the things that you do in your specific profession and your specific specialty, and to hold the other nominal leaders in government, in business, in academia, and influencers in entertainment and the social sector, hold them to the same standards that revolve around trust. Can that voice be trusted? Can that piece of information be trusted? Can this company I'm about to make a deal with, is it trusted? Long-term trust I'm talking about, real trust. And if we think about those basic principles, I think we will emerge from today's combustible world in a much better place. And it's up to everybody here to make sure that that happens. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. So you mentioned entertainment, and of course, Fernando, you come from an extraordinarily different lens. So you come from background in creative industries beyond the scale. You just have to read the bio. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you view the opportunities to use tech, and particularly creativity in tech, to increase cooperation and collaboration on a global stage?
Well, yeah, pick a lens, right? So in my world, so my history is I developed a few pop stars you may know, and developed a few, co-developed a few genres from the past 20 years. And here's what I learned. Well, I love Clay Christensen's idea of trust, right? That the fact that you move at the speed of it. If you have it, you move fast. If you don't have it, you move slow. And if we look at building trust around the world currently, well, it's probably the most challenging it's ever been, because we have different modalities that we never had before in existence of humanity, right? Especially in tech, because of tech. And yet we're in a space now where we're dealing with the ramifications of choices our societies have made hundreds of years ago to 100 years ago to more recent times. So it's a lot of variables here that are overwhelming for the populace. And when you look at what you just mentioned, Lynn, I think it's very powerful, is that we are stakeholders in this narrative that's ongoing in the world. And we're seeing existential threats to all our communities, the free world, and it's critical for us to understand truth. And so the challenge that I personally have, understanding, coming from content, coming from academic perspectives as well, but also kind of a pragmatist, approachable perspective, I suffer from struggling to decipher truth. I mean, the narratives I see in the West on social media and digital media, who we've been trained to trust, right, as a society in the West, especially the youth, are biased and not symmetrical in truth. So, and this is Immanuel Kant's truth. It's not like, what is truth, right? Well, there's universal truth, and that's what I'm looking for. Like, but I come here and I hear stories. I was at a Knesset today and trying to hear the narrative and the truth from this side, and it's overwhelming how disparate the stories are, right? And it's hurtful and it's challenging to discover this truth and know that we are exposed as Westerners to something, you know, platforms are delivering that maybe are essentially the truth. And so I work in the content world. I'm aware that content is very powerful at shaping our stories. Our stories, so our brain has multiple hierarchical cortical structures, are constantly discerning a story from your environment. And you sit in two spaces of this behavioral deterministic perspective. You're either an observer and you allow the environment to tell a story for you in which you interpret and make it your own, or you're proactive and you self-author your own narrative. But to be effective at self-authoring your own narrative, you need to have access to truth, and we just don't have it. So how do you develop trust in a world where truth is not available? And there's no way to discern it. So then you add one more level and layer to this, is tech. Well, I mean, most of our modern tech now, especially on the AI side, is open source, right? And so that gets us to a further degree of trust issues, right? So what I do find solace is in being here, because this is arguably the leading community of cyber and AI. So if anyone knows about trust and building technologically savvy instruments to discern trust and truth, it's here. And that's why I'm here. And that's why this conversation is important in real time as I'm taking notes and learning how we can use content to spread truth for the free world.
Thank you. It reminds me of that line from June, like, if you can control it, you can destroy it. And it sort of feels that we're in this world, but sort of being able to build yourself to be part of that conversation is often part of the missing picture. So we've had a bit of dark framing, but a little bit of optimism. And let's move to the side of thinking about where we can build solutions. So one of the challenges for smaller countries can be building that holistic understanding of tech, of where it sits in its foreign policy and diplomacy. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've approached it in Romania?
Yes, thank you. I would take the question, I would extend the question and say that we took it regional after developing it in Romania. And I'm starting with this quote that a friend told me once, which says that there's no country big enough to make it alone, and there is no country small enough to not be able to make a difference. That's a fact. So actually it's the reality, the current reality of the world, because either we align the like-minded countries, small and big ones, either we will choose to play an independent game which will never succeed. But in this framework, we succeeded in doing legislation, for example, on 5G, foreign direct investment, etc., because we had somebody standing behind us. That was our best partner and friend, United States of America. And that's a fact. First of all, you know, I remember first time when I came here in Israel, and I was not impressed. Impressed, it's very little said. I had goosebumps when I saw that one of the defense systems here was run by a 21-year-old girl. And the patriotism I saw in her eyes and the patriotism I saw in that person was like just, you know, made me to go back home and preach to all the Romanians what I've seen in this country. And I've seen this in Norway when I used to live in Norway. But I give it this specific example. There's no country small enough to not be able to make a huge difference to take the leadership. I was listening to the former Prime Minister Bennett this morning. I mean, definitely, if you've managed as a country to be here today, and I'm not going to align again all the awesome things that are happening aside of the current situation, temporary current situation, sad situation here, is because you had political leadership. You had leaders. You are having leaders and you are following leaders, and that's what a nation is built on. So we've reached a point where we actually started to preach about trusted tech, listening to our great partner, and everybody was saying that time, like, you're crazy. That's not possible. And the things were so simple. I'm going back to the first phrase. It's black and white. Things are very simple. It's not complicated. You want to steal data or you want to protect data? You want to steal technology or you want to build technology? You want to do unfair competition, subsidize with intel agencies your companies and pretend that you're playing a free market? Either you let the free market and you subsidize private companies with the government with common money from the market, with people's tax money, and let them develop and create transparent products. And we can go for hours in comparing the way that the two worlds are doing the things on Earth. So we, at a particular time, when everybody said, no, United States is wrong on trusted, the 5G clean pad, and all the work that Len and his team and great people across the ocean did that time, we said, no, actually, we want to be the first ones who are doing this thing, 5G. And the chances to be there compared to all the competition you would put a line across Europe would be like, why Romania? Almost nobody believed that. Because if you want to really do it, you will find always a way to do it. It takes 5 people in a country, 5 in another country, 5 in another country, like-minded people, which if they decide to do something good, they can do it. I don't want to remember you the David and Goliath story, which I believe a lot in it. You have to believe, and more than that, you have to truly believe in the values. And I'm not a naive person. I'm very pragmatic, and I've seen a lot of things in the years spent in politics and now in the government. You have to stand for your values. And at the end of the day, no matter whoever says whatever says, at the end of the day, the truth will prevail. At the end of the day, you will win, you will not lose, definitely. And at the end of the day, you will be able to stand in front of everybody and say, hey, we did this for the future generations, we did this for our nations, we did this for the core values that united us. I can write a book about that.
I know, but I trust the clock, and that's not going to give us much time. And also, I mean, let's get to Jerusalem. But I want to come very quickly. Actually, can we pass it to Fernando for 1 second? Thank you. So let's go back to you talk about nature tech and creative tech as a tool of soft power, and that's sort of where your institute works in. Can you share a little bit more of your vision and experience of sort of galvanizing this creative power, and particularly sort of, as Pavel said, where small states can actually use this, and where this sits also for the future of trust and diplomacy?
Yeah, this started from this idea of, not mine, it's Joseph Nye's idea of soft power, and which is the influence of culture to shift perspectives and narratives authentically. And then you have Joseph Nye's hard power, which is military industrial strength, et cetera, and then you have a hybrid of two, smart power. and I kept looking at models throughout history of how people can influence and be a force for good. And one is because I think, and I like looking at disparate ideas, things that don't really conciliant, things that don't really belong to the big can, essentially. And I saw, what music did during the Vietnam War, and how it drove campuses and college campuses to express their opinion about the war and their misalignment and not agreeing with the government in public and using music as a diplomatic instrument. And I was looking at the ramifications of that, and then I also paralleled that with pop music. You look at South Korea with our friend Mr. Bang, who is a good friend of mine, who developed this small little band called BTS, and helped catalyze to what now is 5% of the GDP in South Korea, right? So you can see, we can draw these threads between influence, economic development, and growth, but as well as the chance and possibility to build trust, and a chance, the possibility to deliver mechanisms for diplomacy that have been underutilized. I think music is very benign and overlooked instrument of diplomacy. And so we build these instruments around the world. And again, smaller countries, we're working with Guatemala right now, which is quite incredible. And I won't give it too much details because it's more of a surprise, but what's going to happen in a good way. And the story and narrative in Guatemala is probably not the best according to the Western optics, right? They're exporting immigrants to the U.S., and this is a very false narrative of a country that's very beautiful and offers so much to the world, right? And so what would happen if we catalyze use music and to articulate a different story for the country, with the country, in a way that brings this country closer to potentially economic development and partnerships with the world, right? So we're drawing these threads in real time. We don't know what we don't know, but we are sure that if we don't try, we won't get to a point of unity.
Thank you. Right, we're fast running out of time, which I knew we would. I want to go to Amir and then you're going to have to split your time equally. But building on that and sort of the impact of soft power, and for Israel, that's very much been the tech industry. How have you found that in reality on the ground, reshaping your interactions and your diplomacy?
So from my professional perspective, the field that I'm dealing with in the last 3-4 years, we're trying to leverage this. We've heard a lot about Israel as a superpower in cyber and in very soon also in AI and other EDTs. How to leverage this and to leverage the technological innovation that Israel is enjoying, both in getting better relations with some of our friends, whether in the region and elsewhere, leveraging this to build trilateral and quadrilateral relationships, and also leveraging this in something that has been very traditional for Israel, international cooperation, international assistance, on the basis of the models that we started in the 50s in Africa and elsewhere, Latin America, Asia. Israel as a small, at that time, very poor and small country, but reaching out and trying to assist developing countries, developing nations. So the same thing, how to leverage this technological and innovation superpower to make to make the world as a better place, basically.
I've seen that a lot in disaster assistance. So final words, Len. Krach Institute, the really innovative, built a tech academy and tech diplomacy platform to try and upskill in this regard. Give it sit on one leg.
Yes, thank you. So I think everybody here understands the central role that technology is going to play in shaping the world of tomorrow. And what we found, I'm a former State Department official, and what I found in my conversations around the world is there's a big gap between understanding technology among decision makers in different sectors. It's not enough that people in this room know the importance of tech. What's important is that decision makers in government understand the importance. The business leaders understand its importance. Academia understands its importance. Media understand its importance. And the gap in speaking the language is a potential disaster that is going to lead to many misunderstandings. And so the Krach Institute for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue University in the United States has just launched something called the Tech Diplomacy Academy. And the Tech Diplomacy Academy is an online portal that is aimed at global leaders to close that gap in understanding. And I see some of you are reaching for your phones. Do it. It's techdiplomacyacademy.org. techdiplomacyacademy.org. And as a bonus, you know, they're gonna love me because just for Cyber Week, there's a discount. If you go to techdiplomacyacademy.org and type in, you try one of the courses that's available there, and type in Cyber Week 50, you'll get a 50% discount, please. I want to make sure like this whole room does it, because I'm going to look on the metrics later. But anyway, the point is that we cannot afford for there to be misunderstanding in leadership on these issues. I don't know if you've ever seen congressional hearings on technology where, you know, the congressperson is asking one question, the tech CEO is answering a totally different question. Nobody knows what anybody's talking about. It's comical if it weren't so scary. So the stakes at speaking this language are enormous for everybody in this room and beyond this room. So, and that is why we decided that this is a contribution that we can make toward recognizing the importance of technology and empowering everybody to be at least on a similar level in understanding especially these critical and emerging technologies like AI and 5G and semiconductors and the role that they play in everything that we do, both commercially and as nations, but also as a way to level the playing field for countries that Fernando was talking about that are struggling to tap into the resources of the United States, Europe, and other advanced countries. So everybody needs to be up to speed on the implications of this area, and not to mention the diplomats. Diplomats are no longer just diplomats without understanding the importance of technology, which is why tech diplomacy is an emerging field in diplomacy. More and more countries are bringing on specialists who can speak this language and bridge the difference between innovators, business people, and government officials so that the policies of tomorrow, that try and govern these technologies like the AI Act or various other agreements make sense, because we don't know where we're going yet. And we certainly don't want uninformed decision makers to make decisions that limit the boundaries of where we can go, but at the same time stifle free countries and innovators in the free world from optimizing the tools that are available to all of us in the free world, which actually give us a competitive advantage. Because if the free world, individuals, governments, businesses, tap into the resources that we all have in common, I mean, if we just look at the math, we comprise about 3/4 of the global GDP. So if we agree and align on things like, trusted technology standards, basic framework of what that means and how we're going to innovate and compete and implement, then we're going to decide what tomorrow looks like, and not those that don't respect the values that we respect and honor look like. And that's why it's important for all of us to start at a common place, and Tech Diplomacy Academy is a way that we think we can contribute toward that.
Thank you so much. Traffic waits for no person, particularly traffic to Jerusalem, that I know. And just to wrap that up, and we think we're about to bring out the second version of our Tech Diplomacy Index. And whilst it sounds like a lot of countries are engaged in it, I will put it out there just as a sneak peek. There are only 40 countries in the world that have a fully fledged, like either cyber ambassador, tech ambassador. So there are huge holes in the world that need to tap into these different approaches so that we can build the tech diplomacy standards or the trusted tech standards that we need. I hope that it was worth, I know it was worth staying, but I want to give you a huge thanks to the panel, to Len, to Fernando, to Amir, to Pavel, to really hopefully pushing the dial on the conversation of some of the things that you've heard today and really putting some of the practical steps forward that we can take to build a better trusted tech future. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of Cyber AI Week.